You don't have to pay people, as I know from hard experience, you don't have to pay people to participate in these events. You don't have to rehearse. You generally don't have to have sets. Your costs go right down. I think that's one of the reasons why we can explain in the past 10 years there has been such a plethora of reality TV shows. Can I also respond to this question about work, which I think is hugely important? The reality television shows themselves, I think, have an almost paradoxical relationship to work. Some of the shows, like MasterChef, which I started watching in preparation for this panel and became completely addicted to MasterChef, despite being a terrible cook myself. I love watching now other people cook. This is a show about achievement. You have to actually produce a good meal and get the approval of Michelin-starred Michel Roux Jr. in order to progress to the next stage. So that's a sort of instance in which work is of the essence in reality TV. But in shows like Big Brother, it's not. In fact, that's a dream of, it's an anti-capitalist dream, if you will, of transcending labor and being ushered magically into the realm of celebrity. So on one side, some reality television is work-orientated, achievement-based, and some presents a fantasy of escape from labor, of no achievement or accomplishment at all, but simply gaining the status of celebrity. So why does it draw the distinction between celebrity and fame? People who are celebrities are simply known for being known. There's nothing behind it. It's just recognition. So I think reality TV presents us with two visions of the future of work.
Stefano, any responses? So I would be curious to hear how you could spot the recession coming by watching.
Well, I mean, you could spot a recession come when you can see that eventually that people can no longer sustain what's been placed on them in terms of the burdens and the debts and things like that. But I'd like to just respond to what Richard's saying, because it's certainly true that these are different versions of work, but they're completely caught up with each other. If you think about gardening shows or cooking shows or home improvement shows, the point about this is work you're supposed to undertake on your own, at your expense, through your own organization, right? So there, you work like crazy, right? Because I'm not putting any money into that. You're putting the money into that. You're putting the time. You're putting in the labor. It's very different in a more organized setting in which I have to modulate work. There are times when I don't need you, times when I do need you. I need to teach you boredom as well as performance and creativity. And I would argue that's what's really going on in Big Brother. Not that they're opposite visions of work, and certainly not that Big Brother is anti-capitalist, but in fact that they're different forms of the organization of work. When you're working for yourself, we want you to work like a dog. When you're working for us, actually, we can't sustain you working like a dog. We actually need to modulate you, and I think that's what we see in some of these shows myself.
Let's open it out to the audience. Questions, points that people would like to make?
This is an audience which no one watches reality television.
Yeah.
Immediately betray my television watching behavior. But I just wondered if you could comment on the relationship between the sort of rise of reality TV programming and a sort of sense of intimacy, and the idea that that the authenticity of a particular person can be played out more effectively on television. So, and here I'm really going to let myself down in this academic context, but I was recently, as in walking into this room, informed that Katie Price has just left the jungle. And her motivation for entering the jungle, for those of you who are the uninitiated, is that in, I think it was 2003 or 2004, she went into I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and met the very charismatic Peter Andre, Australian, Greek, Cypriot. And of course, a tremendous romance was played out before everybody, and everybody was, suddenly, Peter Andre was now famous again, or he was known again, and everybody's reaction to Katie Price changed. There was a sort of intimacy. She was humanized in some way. Now, of course, everybody knows that they recently divorced. Her motivation for going back into the jungle was to prove to Peter that she was unchanged. She was this same simple person and the wonderful, authentic Katie that he fell in love with in 2004. How does that relationship to intimacy really become so acceptable within that context?
Richard?
Well, I think the emotional terms of that understanding, of her understanding, not your understanding, are fraudulent or misplaced. How have we gotten to the point where you have to go on a global platform in order to achieve intimacy? It seems to me very strange. It's the wrong answer to the right question. Surrounding that, of course, is the complete editorial, it's not a criticism, it's simply a fact of how these things work, is the complete editorial manipulation of the subject. In Australia, Big Brother, for every 1 minute that you saw on television, 1,567 minutes were on the floor of the editing room. You are seeing a highly massaged subject and intersubjectivity in reality television. So even, although I wouldn't want to, even if you presume the emotional legitimacy or level-headedness of this agenda, which I wouldn't, Katie Price and anybody else simply has no control in that situation, because what Peter Andre or anybody else sees is the product of the production team, not of the desires of the subject.
Gentleman over here. A gentleman over here, then a question there, and then Trevor.
I was intrigued, Stefano, at your observations about seeing decline aforehand. My mind was cast back to several centuries ago in what was encapsulated, I think, by Gibbon as bread and circuses. Do you see the reality television as being a circus, or it's gotten out to the stage where it actually is bread because we need it?
Well, that's a nice question. Actually, I think there are probably elements of both in it. And when I read it to try to tell us something about how work is changing, obviously I can't read it in a one-to-one correlation in that way. However, the question has to be asked, why this form of a circus now? You know, what is it now about this circus that's important? So for instance, you know, I'm sorry to pull this example, it's the one that comes to my head, but Deleuze talks about the change in psychoanalysis from psychoanalysis based in the family to one that's based on the couple. And he has a whole analysis around how that new kind of intimacy enters. And it's analysis about the changing social circumstances that people find themselves in, and that the industry of psychoanalysis follows those changing circumstances and reorganizes itself. I think it's fair to say that the industry of circuses is following a certain sort of structure of feeling in the time and moving in these directions. And that's why, as Rich and I were talking earlier, we also see some movement in terms of reality television. So it's called the rise and fall of reality television. And it is changing because obviously work is now undergoing further changes with kind of incredible indebtedness and other issues that are coming to the fore in the last couple of years. And I think we'll continue to see circuses change as a result of that, and always to have that element of bread not far behind now.
And I think the notion that one is required and one is a luxury, again, was blurred in ancient Rome, just as it is today. One question, and then there's a question over there.
The first debate this morning was about the decision to go to war. And one of the influences was the increasing influence of the media in exposing the details of the war, the soldiers' bodies coming back to Wootton Bassett and so on. How do you think that the transparency, expectations of transparency of everyday life created by reality TV is likely to work into influencing, for better or for worse, the way that the decisions in government are taken and the prosecutions of very important issues such as the various wars that the UK is involved in?
We only have 10 minutes, I should tell you. Steph?
Well, it's pretty selective, isn't it? I mean, I've been working away on the banking crisis, and I can tell you, you know, it's almost impossible to